Dear Nicolai Tangen, dear students, dear friends of NHH, and dear colleagues, welcome to the Lehmkuhl Lecture 2021. This annual lecture is an important event at NHH. The lecture is given in the honor of the founding father of NHH, former cabinet minister Kristofer Lehmkuhl. Mr. Lemkuhl was a businessman and a politician. And at the height of his political career, he was appointed a cabinet minister in the government of 1905. That was actually important. But even more important is the fact that he was an untiring champion for NHH. He founded what we call Foreningen for Norges Handelshøyskole i Bergen, or the association in support of a Norwegian business school in Bergen. And that turned out to be a success. In 1917, the government actually did decide to establish NHH. Due to World War I and dramatic times, NHH started its activities in 1936. But right up to his death in 1949, Lemkuhl followed the activities at the school with a never-weakening interest. Mr. Lemkuhl's birthday is in the fall, actually in September, and every year we honor his memory by this annual lecture in his name. The lecture takes place close to his birthday. This year we are honored and happy that Nicolai Tangen accepted our invitation to give the Lehmkuhl Lecture of 2021. Nicolai is the CEO of NBIM, Norwegian Bank, Norges Bank Investment Management. This is the capital management wing of our central bank, being responsible for the management of the oil fund, or more formally, the government pension fund global. We are talking about the largest sovereign wealth fund on the planet, amounting to 11,591 billion. At least that was the number yesterday. It might have increased since yesterday, but approximately in that ball game. I will argue that the fund is not only the biggest sovereign wealth fund, but maybe also the best one. I know, trust me, read my lips, because I spent 6 years at the executive board of the fund. Before you came to NBIM, you founded the investment fund ACO in London, where you acted as the CEO and investment director. Nicolai's educational background is diverse and interesting, I have to argue. Economics and finance from Wharton, psychology, actually, from LSE, and even a master's degree in art history. And last but not least, I believe that is crucial, 1.5 years here at NHH. Now, at the current stage, you have spent a year or so with NBIM. According to rumors, you are in that capacity not only caring about numbers, analytics, spreadsheets, and financial models, but deeply about the people and the nuts and bolts of the organization. This probably explains the title of your talk today, 1 + 1 = 3. Well, I'm not sure, but well, 1 + 1 = 3. How people can create amazing results together. Dear Nicolai, the floor is yours. We look forward to your talk.
Two years ago, we had a big problem in the oil fund. One of the senior fund managers, called Morten Molde, saw that something was wrong with one of the big holdings we owned. Morten Molde graduated from this school in 2000, and he had increasingly become a senior fund manager in the oil fund, just like some of you will be one day. There were some articles in the Financial Times where they talked about some potential accounting problems with a company called Wildcard. And Wildcard was one of the darlings of the German stock market. Everybody loved Wildcard. So Morten started to dig in the accounts started to request accounts from small subsidiaries, started to wonder, why is it that a company that has several $1 billion worth of cash on the balance sheet, why do they issue debt? And so he involved some of his colleagues, and increasingly more and more of them, and they just did more and more investigative work. They were looking at LinkedIn, for instance, because the company said that they had 2,500 people in Asia, but why were the LinkedIn accounts so passive? They looked at Google Maps, Google Photos, looked at the addresses that the company gave for their offices, looked at who other people were there, you know, as tenants. How could they fit in that many people in these small offices? The whole thing just didn't make any sense. And he involved more and more people. They got in touch with accounting professor in America, who basically said that, you know, everything is fine. There are no problems with this company. But they just didn't believe him and continued to do the work and started now to sell down the position. And this went against them. So at some stage, there were several 100 million kroner underwater with their position. Then, a few months later, the auditors came out with a statement. There actually are no cash in this company. They have cheated with their accounts. This is a fraud. And the share price went to zero. Morten Molde and the team saved the fund for 2,500 million due to all this fantastic work. Now, I have called this speech 1 + 1 = 3. And that is not to just make it clear that my math is not very good, because it isn't that great. But it is because this is not about math. People is not about math. People is much more interesting. It's not rocket science. It is much more difficult than that. So today I'm going to talk about people and how we can become better. I'm going to talk about how I think we should organize groups of people, and then how I think we can best lead them. So let's start with the people side. I want to describe the characters of human beings which I think are the most important. And they would be grit, patience, dannelse, and then confident humility. When I was in the army, I did something called the Russian language course, because at that stage, this was, you know, late 80s, the big enemy was Russia. And they just didn't educate enough Russian-speaking people at the university, so therefore they had to do a few more in the army. And at that stage, it was, you know, very difficult to get in, lots of clever dudes, and I was really lucky, and I was one of the people who they accepted. But if you think finance and math is difficult, try Russian. It is just impossible. I think they have 1,000 ways of saying, you know, all kinds of things. At least that's what it felt like at the time. And I didn't do very well. I was the worst student. And I struggled very hard, because what we did was rehearsing and swatting up and learning vocabulary day in, day out. That's how we spent every Friday night, because we had written tests every Saturday. And if you failed 3 tests, you were sent to the Russian border, to patrol service. And I tell you, that's, you just don't want to be there, okay? So I struggled really hard, and I remember I came back from holiday once, and I thought, you know what, I just can't take this anymore. Put on my jacket, I went to the principal's office, because I wanted just to quit. But I just couldn't get myself to knock that door. And I don't know what it was, but I just didn't do it. And that's probably the best thing I've done in my whole life. Because I did finish the study. Worst, I mean, I was just like hanging in there with my nails, scraped through, but I did get the exam, and I got some of my best friends, who I still have today. Now, we all love the idea of talent. It means that one has natural aptitude. But I don't really believe in that. What I believe in is grit. And grit is about follow through. It's about resilience and perseverance. It's about staying the course, through hardship and misfortune. It is the powerful motivation to achieve your ambitions. In short, it's about not giving up, taking it on the chin, and move on. And it's very, very important for you people to remember that grit can compensate for not so fantastic grades. And it's also important for employers to have this in mind and to value grit as well as grades. Everyone needs grit. I, for sure, needed a lot of grit when I took this job. And I will need it again when times get tough. When the value of the fund goes down, because it will, there is nowhere to hide. And so I need to have grit. I also believe in patience and lifelong learning. And the ability to learn throughout your whole life has never been better. Now, I meet a lot of students who are really stressed and who feel that they are in a hurry. And I just don't get it. I mean, what's this hurry about? And it's just kind of absurd in a way, when you are young and you have the whole life ahead of you, that you feel you're in such a hurry. And when you are really old like me, and you have hardly got any time left, you have suddenly a lot of patience. This just makes no sense. You are going to measure your life when you are 90, not when you are 27. Now, maybe this has to do with the understanding of time. What is time? So my brilliant predecessor, Yngve Slyngstad, what did he do? He went to an island in northern Norway and spent 6 months with his German philosophy books. That's pretty cool. And what I think we should all do is to travel to Bhutan. Go to a mountaintop and basically spend 6 months in a temple drinking tea, green tea, with the monks. I think that's when you learn what time is. So that's on my list to do. Now, the Norwegian word dannelse is hard to translate into English. Maybe the Brits don't know what it is, but perhaps they do actually, when I think about it. It's basically about what kind of knowledge do you need and what kind of skills do you need to obtain to become a good citizen. The more you know about the world and its history, the better you will be getting around the world. So for all you students, you just need to read widely. You need to read Tolstoy, Thomas Mann, not only the stuff that's on your professor's reading list, but read much more widely. And be curious about, as many things in life as possible. And the most important thing, spend your student loan. Every bit of it. Spend it on travel and experiences. Now, I have been in this place, in this auditorium before. I was sitting down there 30 years ago. I was there on the symposium. And I remember this speaker, it was a lady, she was very important, and she said, you know what? 30 years from now, you guys will all have forgotten everything I say. But you have to remember one thing. There's only one thing. Travel. Get out there. See the world. And in 30 years from now, if there's only one thing you remember from this, same thing. Get out of here. And see the world. None of us here is a genius. And the sooner we realize that, the better it is. Because when you look around, you see that there are plenty of people who are smarter than us, people we can learn from. My first job after Wharton was in a firm called Cazenove. Now, I'll tell you one thing. What American universities are very good at is to inflate your view of yourself, okay? So I came out of Wharton and I thought I was God's gift to finance. And I started to work for this really, really posh English company, right? And they had, you know, the Queen as their client, and the whole thing was really, really good. And I thought I did a pretty good job. Then, when I had been there 4 months, the day before my Christmas holiday, my boss tells me, Nicolai, we just need to talk, and we need some feedback. And, you know, and I thought, gee, this is going to be great. I just wonder how big my pay increase is going to be. So he says, Nicolai, let's go down to this wine bar. Because in England, feedback sessions take place in wine bars. We go down these stairs. It's like going down in a cave. It was really dark. And he takes up a piece of paper. It's kind of longer than a roll of toilet paper. And it's a list of all the mistakes I have made during 4 months. Oh, that was not great. I went back for Christmas and I didn't sleep for a week. And I thought, you know what? He's got a point. I've just been utterly useless. I need to get my act together. And so when I got back, I started to work really hard. Really, really good feedback for me to get. And I quite like feeling, you know, inferior and knowing that I know very little. That's like a driving force in my life. The American psychologist Adam Grant talks about something called confident humility. Now, you need to believe in yourself. You need to trust yourself. Because if you don't believe in yourself, nobody else will believe in you. But too much confidence in yourself will lead you in the wrong direction. You need to know when you are wrong and act accordingly. And perhaps that's one of the most important things I've learned as a portfolio manager, is to be stubborn to a point, but then you have to change your mind when facts change. A lot of people fall in love with themselves and their thinking and their views. That's very, very dangerous. And it can also be very expensive. Now, in the oil fund, we've done something really cool. We have made a mistake machine. Because as a portfolio manager, if you get, what we try to do is to beat the stock market, right? If you get 50% right, you are as good as the market. If you get 51% right, you are very good. 52% right, you are a genius. So even if you are a genius, you have 48% wrong. Now, we need to learn from this, right? So if you know, let's say now we have Espen Erlandsen, who, by the way, is my boss from the Ministry of Finance. He's there. Now, Espen Erlandsen, you are going to buy some Apple shares. And before he puts on the order, he says, but Espen, you have never made money in Apple before. You have never made money in America even. You are really stressed because you have lost money 9 months in a row. And historically, when you have stress like this, it's not very good. Your ticket size is too low compared to your ideal ticket size. And everybody else loves the stock, you know. Broker recommendations are sky high. And historically, that's been really bad for you. So this is a machine we've made to really put the learning into a system. We don't like to face our failures. You know, it's really very hurtful. But what we think this machine will do is to really put this into a system and improve our results over time. Okay, I will now move from this personal level over to the organization level. How does an organization get the best out of people? And how do we do it at the oil fund? There is a quote saying that none of us is better than the totality of us. It's by the American author Kenneth Blanchard. And it's pretty self-explanatory, because very rarely are great results accomplished by one person alone. You know, Nobel Prizes now are most often achieved by teams. When people come together, they need to be organized. And one of these ways of organizing people is called bureaucracy. Okay, there is nothing wrong with bureaucracy as such. I mean, I'm working in one, you know, with the bank and so on. It's part of one. But the bureaucratic model of organizing people is, I have to say, not my favorite. Now, do you know what one of the worst features of bureaucracy? It's what we in Norwegian call årshjulet. The annual cycle. God, I hate årshjulet. What I visualize when I hear årshjulet is a donkey, okay? I mean, nothing wrong with donkeys. They are stubborn, a bit like me. But here you have a donkey walking around, tied to a millstone, not moving away from this. There is no other way the donkey can do the work than moving in circle. He's walking himself further and further down into the mud. Årshjulet kills creativity and good things. If you are a student and you apply to a firm where they have årshjulet, don't apply. And if you work in a company where they have årshjulet, bin it. Okay, now there is a book called Humanocracy by Gary Hamel. And he points to this bureaucracy and he says, we should not resign ourselves to organizations that are less capable than the people. And that is what bureaucratic organizational models do. They make humans less than what they are, and that's why I don't like them. Now, to solve this challenge, the first thing we need to do is what we call silo busting. A silo is something that divides things. It creates walls, fences, and boundaries within an organization. And they may look good on paper, but they really hamper an organization. At the Oil Fund, we know this, and we work very hard on tearing the silos down by putting together more diverse teams. And the investment simulator I talked about is a good example of this. Here we have portfolio managers, people from risk, working together with IT people, and so on. These people all used to work in silos, but now they come together to build something really great. Silos should be used for grain, not for people. It can, by the way, also be used for art, as you have seen in Kristiansand. Now, I like the idea of humanocracies instead of bureaucracies. And to quote Hamel, in bureaucracy, strategy is set at the top. In humanocracy, strategy is an open, firm-wide conversation. In bureaucracy, innovation is a specialized activity. In humanocracy, it's everybody's job. In bureaucracy, control comes from oversight and rules. In humanocracy, it comes from transparency and peers. Another important dimension of organizing people is to get the best out of them, is to put the right people together, and that is what I call diversity. In the Oil Fund, you have traditionally found people who studied economics and finance, and a lot of people from this school. Now, some of these things are about to change. Today, there are political scientists working with communication, philosophers in corporate governance. We have a doctor, for instance, as a portfolio manager, and you may have read, we have a sports psychologist working across the firm. We even have a specialist in cybersecurity who has no formal education, Karim, and he is my hero. An organization needs people that know different things, have different backgrounds and different experiences in life. That's when they start to disagree. And I just love it when people disagree. And it's the friction that we need to create solutions and new insights. Now, if you're interested in Norwegian oil history, and I'm sure you are since you're here, you will recognize the name Farouk Al-Qasim. This name is a very important part of oil history, and it is perhaps the most prosperous diversity story this country has seen. Because Farouk was born and raised in Iraq, and he studied petroleum geology at the Imperial College in London. There he met Solfrid. Yes, you're right, she's Norwegian. After some years in Iraq, they moved to Norway because their son needed treatment. And that was a piece of luck for both them and for us. Because this was the beginning of the Norwegian oil adventure. And Farouk had seen what happened when the big international oil companies took the large part of the wealth and very little was left for the countries themselves. And that what he changed when he came to Norway and set up the Norwegian model. And Farouk's story is really about having the right knowledge at the right time in the right place. He was exactly what Norway needed at the time. But it was merely a coincidence that he came to Norway thanks to Solfrid. To me, diversity is about attracting people that think differently, act differently, and have a different experience and background. Farouk was very different from us, unusual background and different life experiences. But that was what we needed. But today, if your name is Farouk, you would probably still have a harder time to get work than if your name was Frank. And that really scares me. Now, let me ask you, if you hire to your company, do you hire somebody who is the same as you or somebody who is completely different? If you look at Norwegian CEOs, that's a very homogeneous group. They have read the same things. They have been to the same lectures. A lot of them, too many of them, have been to this school. And the strange thing is that despite many of the largest companies being knowledge-based, only 3 of the top 50 leaders in this country have been in charge of HR before becoming CEOs. It's easier to hire somebody who's done the same as you because it's less risky. Nobody gets fired from doing something non-risky. Now, I am not a believer in that. I believe that diversity must be in an organization's DNA. That's just not something you can delegate to HR. And there is a trend now in international companies to have, people in charge of responsibility. Chief Diversity Officer, Director of Diversity, Head of Diversity. FBI has got one, Harvard Business School has got one. And when you look at LinkedIn, there are a lot of titles like this now. But diversity cannot be just one person's responsibility. It's a bit like love. It cannot be delegated. It's just too important for that. Okay, moving on to the final point, leadership. Now, in a perfect world, you don't need leaders because people can lead themselves. But of course, the world is not perfect. So what does it take from leaders to make the best out of people? Well, firstly, stay out of it as much as you can. Know when you are needed. Because your employees and your people, they know more than you do. And that is exactly how modern companies and humanocracies work. Your job as a leader is to make the environment as good as you can for these people to perform their best, stay motivated, and be on target. Now, in order to do that, you need to communicate, 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 and ask for feedback. In the Oil Fund, we do that every day. Both the leader group and I share as much information as we can. So what we started to do was, for instance, that when we have leader group meetings, 3 days afterwards, we put the notes from the leader group meetings on the intranet. And it's the most read thing that we publish. And then, of course, LinkedIn is great for communication. How many here am I in touch with on LinkedIn? Hands up. That's pretty good. But what's wrong with the rest of you? Hook up. But LinkedIn is also good for internal communication, because I can share my thoughts to the rest of the firm, and we are then on the same page. Personally, I also spend a lot of time talking to people further down in the organization without having the leaders present. And I kind of feel that's a bit like grandparents talking to the grandchildren. The communication is much better if the parents aren't there. Same thing. Now, and then of course, feedback is important. So what did I do when I got the job in the oil fund? Well, I spent my whole life talking to company managements, CEOs and so on. Probably thousands of them over the years. So the first thing I did was to contact the top 10 I had met, the people who I had the most respect for, the people who I thought could teach me a lot. And I asked them, guys, what should I do? I just got this really, really important job and I haven't got a clue how to attack the whole thing. And they said, well, the first thing you need to do, of course, you need to sit down with people and talk to them. And given that you are roughly 500, you should talk to 80. So I sat down with 140. And we spoke in like from half an hour to an hour, and I learned just so much. But there was one interview I remember particularly well. We have a lot of bonds in the oil fund, and we have some great bond fund managers. Now, what does a bond fund manager do? He listens to central bank talk. He listens to conference calls. That's what he does. And he listens to press conferences. So at the end of this interview, this incredible bond guy, it's called Asgeir from Telemark, great guy. He said, Nicolai, you seem like the kind of guy who wants straight feedback. I said, yes, I love feedback. Well, you know, you had this press conference last week. You may remember when I got the job, there were some press conferences. This was the one in May. And he said, in that press conference, you just stank. You were just so bad. I said, okay. Because you got angry, you know. You got annoyed with the journalists. You must never be annoyed with the journalists. So I thought, okay, I need to learn from this. So the last conference we had in August, he helped train me so that I shouldn't be angry with journalists. Now, to me, this is about taking feedback in a great way. It's about silo busting, you know. A bond fund manager helped me prepare for that last conference called last press conference. And it went a lot better. Thanks to Asgeir. Good, Asgeir. I think generally communication needs to be with a bit of enthusiasm in a modern organization. But that's not how it's generally seen in the public sector, for instance. Espen, don't take this personal, it has nothing to do with you, okay? He's from the Minister of Finance. But when I had, this is about the central bank. So the first town hall meeting I had with my new colleagues was, of course, a very important town hall, because I was speaking to all 500 of them at the same time. So a fantastic opportunity to screw up everything if you get it wrong. So I had prepared a huge amount, spent weeks on this thing, and I had a lot of input from friends and so on who, you know, are very honest and give me good feedback. So I thought it was pretty good, right? just as a final check-off, I send it up to Central Bank Governor Øystein Olsen, my boss. Now, Øystein Olsen is one of the finest people in this country. I will go to war with Øystein Olsen anytime. And he has said it's okay for me to tell this story, okay? Okay, so I have written something, which in my mind, it's somewhere between Hamsun and Ibsen. I mean, I think it's incredible, right? I'm so happy with it. And I get it back from Øystein Olsen with 2 words at the top. Generally okay. Now, that's in the public sector. That is called max enthusiasm. Now, that may work like that, but I'm just not so sure it's going to work for generation X, Y, Z, you know, because the new generation just needs feedback in a slightly different way. Now, communication, feedback, and credit contribute the most to motivating people in an intrinsic motivation type of way. To give them this deeper sense of purpose to go to work, this reason to go to work for the oil fund, when perhaps they could have made more money somewhere else. And I believe that to accomplish great things, you need to be very generous with credit and not care who actually gets the credit. So be generous with that kind of thing. Now, I have now told you what I believe is what are the most important features with leadership, but we shouldn't be too serious about it. Let's talk about humor. According to the book, Humor Seriously, Why Humor is a Secret Weapon in Business and Life, managers with a sense of humor are more motivating and more admired. We also see from various research that when people are asked to solve creativity puzzles and things like that, a sense of humor really helps. So when we have meetings in the leadership group in the oil fund, we always start with a funny movie. And that, and not a long one, but a short one. And that really sets the scene for great discussions and the kind of discussions you can have with friends, you know, really frank. And I think the only way to achieve great discussions is through humor and levity, not gravity. So be generous with laughter. It's not going to make you look like a clown. It's going to make you look a bit more human. Okay, now let's connect the dots. How can we make people create amazing results together? That has been the topic for this speech. I started out by saying that this is not a question of mathematics. In mathematics, you know what you get out when you know what you put in, but life is not math. Sometimes 1 + 1 can become 3, but it can also become 0 or 1. And the story I opened the lecture with is a story about Morten Molde and his team and the way they thought differently, the way they showed initiative, creativity, and grit. They challenged the market. They busted the silos to connect the dots and the knowledge in a way to solve this puzzle. And the leaders in the oil fund encouraged them to do so, to go their own way, even though it was a very tough one. That is how 1 + 1 can become 3, and sometimes even 2,500 millions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nicolai, for a splendid lecture, a lot of lessons. Yeah, I have some doubts about some of them, but still, I have to think about it. Thank you. Here you have a book about old Lehmkuhl lectures, actually, for the flight back, maybe. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
I think we have some minutes for some
absolutely.
questions. If there are some questions, we have time. I have the first one myself. That's my privilege.
Yep.
One very interesting thing, and your boss, indirectly at least, in the Ministry of Finance, is over there. You know, he looks nervous from here. What I hear, you know, is okay. Break down the silos. Sounds scary to me, of course, but probably a wise thing, maybe. Break down the walls in a physical way. I know, you know, in your office, you know, that sounds scary as well. And create some informal things in a very rigid system at the outset. So how is that working when you are surrounded by a rigid system? You know, the government thinks they own the phone sometimes. They are a rigid system. The Ministry of Finance is a rigid system. The rest of the central bank, Øystein Olsen, is a rigid system. And right within this rigid system, you have something very flexible, sort of evolutionary. So how is that working?
Well, one thing is to build down the silos internally in the oil fund. But of course, you need some type of silos between Norges Bank and the fund, and the ministry and the fund, for governance reasons. You know, there needs to be a bit of distance. But there doesn't need to be, you know, kind of iron walls. We can make better communication, and so we meet, you know, more frequently than in the past. We have better exchange of, informal communication, just a better flow of people and communication. So you can do a lot of things. You can have informal lunches with the people in the bank and so on to discuss what could potentially become issues before they actually become issues. So there are just many ways of doing it. I just think just think a bit larger about it. Think that you have one goal together, and it's just how to kind of rally the troops to go in the same direction.
Questions over there?
Jan Terje Aspeland. I'm editor of Bergensia, the Sustainable Gazette. We see large sovereign funds and financial institutions all over the world leaving fossil fuels. They don't invest anymore. When will you disconnect from what has made the fund and what you should invest in the future?
Yeah, good question. So, as you may know, the fund has already exited pure upstream companies. We did a few years ago, so that's already taken place. Somebody needs to own a company. Do you solve the problem by just running away and selling your shares, so that these shares will end up in hands who has no responsible thinking whatsoever? Or do you solve the problem by staying in there and actively working with a shift and convincing the company that they need to change? Well, some companies just, run away, and some companies stay in there and try to change it. And we do the latter, and I really believe in it.
Yes, please, over there.
Did Øystein Olsen buy me a beer? Yes, he did. And it was a good one.
Okay, that was an important insight.
That's what I call a good question.
Okay, other questions? Yeah,
yep.
Please.
Should handlingsregelen be adjusted for GDP? I'll tell you one thing. The fantastic thing with my job, you know what that is to make money. What is not part of my job is how to spend the money. And so that is not within what I do.
But the answer is no, it should not. So but that is my answer.
So there are so many things I can't talk about in this job. I cannot talk about anything political, and nothing like that. I once tried to talk about kind of inheritance tax, which I believe pretty strongly about, and that wasn't so popular. So I don't even talk about tax anymore.
But one final question. When we had the coffee before this session, you gave me a very careful, understated hint about our NHH strategic priority into 2021.
Yeah.
And in a very careful way, you said maybe 2021 should be the students' year at NHH. I could have said that, okay, at NHH, every year is a student's year, but I don't think you would be happy with that answer.
Well,
so what did you mean?
No, I wouldn't say I said it so carefully. I said it as strongly as I could.
Yeah.
I said you were going strategically in the completely wrong direction. Because you talked about kind of research, blah, 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 up in the Høyblokka, this and that. and I just said, that's not what this is about. You're about your students. Why is it that I am in touch with so many students on LinkedIn, and I have conversations, meaningful conversations during the weekend and so on, and give advice about kind of career and so on? It's because you don't care. And I just think, and it's called, undervisningsplikt, as if it was a bad thing, to actually teach students. It's great to actually meet the students, to teach them, to be a role model, to meet outside the class, to be available. In this school, there is no link between, how well somebody teaches and what they earn. It's ridiculous, right? It should be the quality of the teaching. You should teach as much as you can. You should have a lot of touch. You should be really high touch with students, as often as you can and as much as you can. That's why I think, friendly piece of advice, 2022 should be about you guys.
So we are right now in the strategy process, a new strategy, and maybe we have found the title, the title of the strategy document. So the leaders of the Students Association is on the front row, so you take note. And any final question? Okay, thank you, Nicolai.
Thank you.
We will turn to the final issue today, and that is an important one. We are talking about a prize, the Lemkuhl grant. And I will now give the word to Hugo Matre, chair of the Lemkuhl Fund, who will present the winners of this year's Lemkuhl grant. Please, Hugo.
Well, this is a good follow-up of what we have heard, because this is about the students, and this is about the future, and the green change, and everything we will meet in the years to come. My name is, as already mentioned, Hugo Matre. I'm chairing the board of the Lemkuhl Foundation. Kristofer Lehmkuhl's Fund for Promotion of Norwegian Business was established in 1920 by Kristofer Lehmkuhl, who was Minister of State in Christian Michelsen's government in 1905. And he was also a leading businessman in Bergen, who worked for the society in many ways, including for this school, as already mentioned by the principal. Every year on June the 17th, which was the birthday of Kristofer Lehmkuhl, the funds distribute funds to promote Norwegian business. This year, the funds board decided to allocate 25,000 Norwegian kroner to Lemkuhl scholarship at NHH. The purpose of the Lemkuhl grant is to acknowledge NHH students or recent graduates who show exceptional abilities in the area of innovation and/or entrepreneurship. With the business sector in need of restructuring, it is of utmost importance to ensure that NHH students are able to start new businesses or help others in their efforts to ensure growth of new activities. Hence, the purpose of the grant is to support NHH's efforts within innovation and entrepreneurship. The criteria is also relating to the purpose. The Lemkuhl grant should primarily be awarded for a master thesis in the field of innovation and entrepreneurship. The master thesis should be related to new product or services or to new business models. It should directly or indirectly contribute to innovation, and it should be of high academic quality. Master thesis submitted in the autumn semester the previous year or in the spring semester, the same year as NHH grants awards, are eligible for nomination. This year, we have seen a higher than usual number of nominations. This is promising for the field of innovation and entrepreneurship at NHH and shows that many NHH students are eager to contribute to new business development. All nomination, and this is important, all nomination has been of very high quality and in relevant fields of study. The prize can only go to one, but the whole field is very promising. The committee at the school has had a challenging job, however, but it unanimously decided on the winner thesis. And the winner is, who is the winner? The master thesis focuses on production and storage of so-called green hydrogen, an issue of significant importance for sustainability and for the transition to new renewable energy sources. Specifically, the thesis develops a mathematical decision model to assess whether electricity price fluctuation can be exploited in a profitable way to produce green hydrogen through electrolysis. Amongst other things, the results of the analysis show that large investments are needed to exploit such price fluctuation, that profitability will depend critically on the technological solutions as well as the specific market conditions, and that investments in storage capacity will be particularly important. The winner contribution stands out by addressing a key challenge for the society and by doing so in close cooperation with a business partner, something which often turns out to create a solid basis for innovative projects. Furthermore, the winner stands out by demonstrating excellent command of the technical aspects of the process as well as the economic analysis by bringing new and important perspectives into the assessments of profitability in the projection of green hydrogen and thus being highly relevant with regard to sustainability. And not least, by presenting solutions that could be of direct relevance for innovation and new business models in the corporate sector. The winner contribution has already been presented for the relevant business agents with very positive feedback. So, the Lemkuhl Grant 2021 goes to Lars Skaugen Strømholg and August Sandal Rolfsen for their master thesis, Flexible Hydrogen Production. Please come up. Gratulerer. If you would like to say a few words, the floor is yours.
Yes, we would like to thank everyone who's worked with this Lehmkuhl Lecture and everyone who has worked with the Lemkuhl grant. We'd also like to thank our supervisors, Endre and Mette Bjørndal, who have helped us a lot through the process and guided us well. And lastly, we would also thank Daniel Jansen from Greenside, who showed us and taught us very much about hydrogen production in the beginning of our thesis writing. So, thank you, everyone.
This ends today's Lemkuhl Lecture. We are back next year with the next new Lemkuhl Lecture. Thank you.